You know that feeling, that unique kind of dread that settles in after midnight, when the rest of the world goes quiet, the fluorescent lights hum just a little bit louder, and you're the only one on duty? Yeah, the night shift is its own little world, a place where the ordinary rules of safety and society can feel, well, dangerously thin.
So let's really get into that. What is it that makes the night shift so terrifying? I mean, we've all felt a version of this, even if we haven't worked one. Is it just about being in the dark? Or is there something more fundamental going on that can turn a totally normal workplace into a stage for absolute terror?
Well, it turns out the core ingredients for fear are basically baked right into the job description. First off, you're isolated. There are way fewer witnesses around if something goes wrong. All that silence just amplifies every single creak, every shadow. And things that seem completely normal during the day, after dark, they become strange, even distorted. We're about to see exactly how these vulnerabilities were used in 4 chillingly true accounts.
So our first theme dives into what is, from my money, the most unnerving scenario possible, when the threat isn't outside trying to get in, but it has already found its way into your supposedly safe space, and it's just waiting. Okay, let's start with a guy named Daniel. He was a night clerk at a small, rural motel. His story centers on one of the most boring, everyday objects you can imagine, that little bell on the front desk. But we're about to see how, in the wrong hands, something so simple can become an instrument of pure psychological horror.
So, picture this. The terror builds in stages. It's 2 a.m. The bell rings. Daniel goes to check the lobby. Completely empty. Okay, maybe a prank. 10 minutes later, ding, rings again, still nobody there. Now the unease is starting to creep in. By 2:25, he's just waiting, right there at the desk. Then it rings a third time. But this time, he sees it. A pale hand reaches up from under his own desk and presses the bell.
And that right there is the absolute core of the terror. The person wasn't outside playing some stupid game. They were already inside, hidden in Daniel's personal space, silently crouching literally feet away from him as he sat there, just waiting for the perfect moment to reveal themselves. Chilling.
Okay, now let's go to a hotel and see how this same kind of terror can be stretched out not for minutes, but for an entire night. This wasn't a sudden shock. It was a slow, agonizing burn. It all starts at 11 p.m. A man uses a stolen card to get a room key. But over the next several hours, he doesn't act like a guest at all. As you can see from the timeline, he just exists. He's staring at a blank TV, wandering the halls, standing silently outside other guests' rooms, and methodically, quietly, watching the clerk at the front desk.
5. For 5 solid hours. I mean, just think about that. For 5 hours, a complete stranger with totally unknown intentions had full, unchecked access to the entire building, every hallway, every door. And all because he played the part of a guest, just long enough to exploit that basic, everyday trust.
All right, so now let's shift our focus a bit. Let's talk about the threats that start from the outside, the ones that create that awful feeling of being watched, of being a target, totally isolated in a little fishbowl of light, surrounded by darkness.
This is what a stalker named Paul actually said to justify his obsession with Meredith, a gas station clerk. Now, what's so wild about this quote is how perfectly it captures his whole method. He wasn't aggressive, not at first. He was manipulative. He was trying to reframe his menacing behavior as some kind of special, deeper attention.
And this slide just illustrates his gaslighting perfectly. You know that thing where someone manipulates you until you start to question your own sanity? Just look at the difference between his words and the actual reality of what he was doing. He says, "I'm just curious," but somehow he knows her name and all these personal details. He says, "Didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," right after leaving a creepy close-up Polaroid of her on the counter. These words were a constant, deliberate weapon to make her feel like she was the crazy one for being scared.
In another gas station story, the threat felt even more coordinated. A brand new car with no license plates parks in a blind spot. When the clerk's friends go out to confront the driver, he just pretends not to speak English before speeding off. And get this, he's immediately followed by a second, identical car that had just pulled in. This was not random. All the details suggest this was a planned, calculated threat.
Okay, so we've heard the stories. Now let's pull back the curtain and really break them down. What are the common threads here? What is the actual blueprint these predators are using to manufacture this kind of fear? At the absolute heart of all of these stories is one single powerful concept: boundary violation.
And this isn't just about breaking a rule, you know? It's about deliberately crossing a line, whether it's physical, like hiding under a desk, or personal, like knowing your private schedule, for the specific purpose of making you feel completely powerless. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because this slide lays out the pattern so clearly. Look at these tactics. Every story involves a boundary violation to get close. Every story uses an ambiguous threat. The person is just sitting there. They're just curious. It's just a bell ringing to make the victim doubt themselves. And, crucially, they all use this slow escalation to gradually, methodically ramp up the terror.
See, this isn't about a quick attack. The goal is way more sinister. It's a methodical process of psychological warfare. By blurring those lines between what's normal and what's threatening, they make the victim question their own judgment. They slowly dismantle your sense of safety from the inside out.
And that, of course, leads us to the aftermath. Because the real damage from these encounters isn't just the fear you feel in that moment. No, it's the fear that latches on and follows you home, long, long after the shift is over.
I mean, this quote from Meredith, the gas station clerk, it just says everything, doesn't it? The stalker is long gone, she's in a new town, a new job, but the terror is imprinted on her. A simple pair of headlights is no longer just a pair of headlights, now it's a potential threat. Her fundamental sense of safety in the world has been permanently broken.
So ultimately, what all of this really reveals is that the true horror isn't the jump scare of a hand under a desk. It's the chilling realization that the social contracts we all depend on to function, that a guest is a guest, that a customer will act like a customer, are incredibly, terrifyingly fragile, and they can be broken at any moment.
And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. We all go through our days just assuming people will behave within certain boundaries. But what happens when you're forced to realize those rules are just a shared agreement, one that can be easily ignored by someone who just wants to cause chaos? How safe are any of us, really?